Thank you, Mike. Wow, 6 kids, that's a lot of work. That makes my job seem pretty easy. I only have 2 sort of grumpy late teenage girls, so you do sort of survive at the end of the day. I also wanted to thank Jonathan for putting this on today, and of course, Andy Hamilton, who is, I would hesitant to say, is going to be the next iteration of Great Hamiltons here, so I think we should be very excited about him and what he's going to be doing at NYU, and even though I went to Columbia, I'm always trying very hard to be balanced in my approach to supporting NYU as well. I am not going to address all of the riveting topics that Mike said I was going to, because I want to try to be a little bit brief, because I know you guys have a lot of material to cover today. But I do want to talk a little bit about jobs, and also acknowledge that we are in a pretty interesting place, I think, in the national discussion about a lot of issues. This is going to be a very interesting and bumpy ride the next couple of years. But a lot of the national discussion, particularly in the past couple of months, has been about retention. And how do we keep what we have? And to me, that's really not the right question, certainly not from a New York City perspective, where status quo is really not anything we're interested in. It's certainly not in our gestalt and in our DNA. We're always looking about the future and thinking about growing the economy and growing the job base. I mean, we are a city that is now at 8.55 million people, our all-time population high, and we are cruising pretty quickly towards 9 million people over the next 10 years. So talking about status quo and retention, to me, is not the right question, and certainly not what I hope folks in this room are focused on. So when I think about the future, I want to think about 500,000 more people coming into this town or staying in this town. So we need to think about where are the high growth sectors where there are also real career ladders. Real career ladders so that people have a chance to really have a decent quality of life, but also that quality of life being organically connected to New York City. So what are the competitive advantages of New York City? And I think we can think about them in a lot of different ways, but clearly our institutions, which are vast and varied, our consumer base. If you are an entrepreneur trying to get your product to market, you have no better place than a consumer base of the size that we have here in New York. And I would always argue that a dense urban environment is exactly the place where innovators and entrepreneurs should be coming to and testing their products. And so for us, our job is to identify strategic investments along a continuum of job creation and company creation so that we can continue to rev that engine. So here's an example of something we've done recently, or as my kids say, stop going blah, blah, blah. Give me an example of what you actually do all day. And so one of the things we do all day is last week we announced a $500 million investment in what we're calling LifeSci NYC, which is a very strategic investment which we think will create about 16,000 new jobs in the biotech and life sciences field. So what is the recipe of that investment? That recipe is millions of square feet of new wet lab space so that folks can actually do the work they need to do in the lab to have the research base to create the products. A training and internship initiative that really focuses on making sure that kids in our high schools and our public and private universities are getting the training they need and the on-the-job connection to these companies so that we can continue to build a more diverse and New York City-based workforce for this very exciting field. And then actually putting our own balance sheet, where we should be putting our balance sheet in various debt and equity products to actually support and make strategic investments in emerging biotech and life sciences company. So that's just one subsector of what we obviously talk about as the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem. But I think it's responding to, in many ways, to the same impulses that are driving other firms in the ecosystem to start growing here and to stay here. Because again, I always think about the great thing about New York is that it's not a one-company town. New York is really where we think about it as a broader sort of hyphen tech economy. It's where tech and innovation do literally collide, as opposed to all these collision theorists who talk about it hypothetically. You literally collide with everybody when you're on the streets of New York. So you have fashion, you have culture, you have finance, you have media, you have advanced manufacturing, you have healthcare, you have government, you have real estate, and obviously education as a critical sector of a diverse economy that allows these extraordinary collisions to happen. So I think it is fair to say that we are the hyphen tech capital of the world, and we will continue to stay that way because we want to see the diversity of it grow. So for us, it's really we want to implement and we want to grow and scale up. And so for me, and for the folks in the audience, I hope if you're an ed tech firm, why would you want to be anywhere else? I can't even begin to fathom why you would want to locate your company anywhere else. And of course, I'm a little biased because it's my job to assume that, but to also make that be true. So obviously some statistics, and also one of our great New Yorkers. The other thing about New Yorkers is, like, really, we do have the best sense of humor. So I don't know why anybody would ever go anyplace else. We have to be a little bit boastful, but also a little bit recognize how nuts it can be to be here. But there are some great and true facts about New York City. New York City has 2 million students, right? You want to test stuff? You got 2 million lab rats right here, 350,000 teachers, 500 colleges and universities, and 1,800 K through 12 schools. So this is the big leagues. We have the biggest public library system in the country, possibly in the world. I'm checking on that. And we spend, our government alone, just municipal government alone, is spending $500 million a year on various workforce training programs. So it is a massive, massive industry here. And obviously, I think John Updike did say it best. So for us, how do we take these, what I think are built-in competitive advantages, and really build on them? So first, the most obvious thing. You got to make New York continue to be the coolest, most livable place in the Americas, and a place where people want to just stay if they already are here, and come to if they are thinking about where to go to school or where to locate their companies. We have to make sure there's an affordable place to live. We have to find a way to make sure that businesses can physically grow here. And we need to make sure that we have the literal infrastructure that allows you all to do what you need to do. So we have things like the fastest free public Wi-Fi system in the country, in the world perhaps. We are expanding city bike and ferries and the way in which people really connect. Again, that collision requires you to be able to get from place to place. We're making huge, huge investments in those types of infrastructure, which are urban infrastructure. How do we make sure that you can really grow here? Well, what is the #1 topic on anybody's list when they're at a cocktail party or having a cup of coffee? Real estate, right? It's all about real estate in New York. So it's our job to make sure that you have the space you need to expand in. So whether it's the really funky old buildings in the Flatiron District that are beautiful and are home to so many great tech companies, making sure they stay commercial property, whether it's building a new innovation hub, an academic campus on Governor's Island, which you should all go to when the weather gets just a smidge warmer, whether it's Building 77, one of the beautiful assets we have in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where incredible companies, academic institutions are locating, or whether it's any of the other amazing assets that we have in the city, we need to put our money where our mouth is so that you guys can grow your companies and keep you here. Because if you don't have flexible, long-term, often below market rents that you can rely on, it's very hard to keep your company going and to keep that piece of the equation of your burn rate down. So we're very excited about doing that. The third thing we're really focused on, as I said, is trying to make sure you have the homegrown talent, the ready-to-work talent that the industry needs to really fuel its growth. And I think that's also where the obvious connection to EdTech goes, where it really is a virtuous cycle in the broader tech ecosystem. Because it's not a shocker to anybody, we've historically, particularly in the public sector, had a real mismatch between the skills that we're teaching and what we need kids to be able to do that employers need in a fastly evolving, changing world. And I say this often, but it's true. When I got into this job, we were spending money teaching kids how to fix typewriters. Nobody had actually looked under the hood and said, what are we doing? So we have an obligation on the government side to really take a look at what we're spending our money on and have it be a demand-driven model of what is going on, what do employers need. So we have a lot to do, and I think a lot of that change starts at our public school. I know that the Chancellor was here this morning, so she probably already mentioned that when we look at where we need to start this work, it starts at the very beginning. And we are the largest school district in America to commit to a computer science education for every child at every of the 3 basic grade levels, primary, middle, and high school. That's an $80 million investment in a program called Computer Science for All. It's sort of shocking that in 2016, this is news, that the largest public school system in America is actually implementing a Computer Science for All program. And we're introducing coding classes to equip kids for the tech economy, but we're also focused then on the technology we need to equip teachers. It's a two-way street so that they can have the ability to diagnose and analyze and close learning gaps and to help connect parents in more productive ways with what's happening in their classroom. and to make sure that students can, again, navigate and interpret the information that they're all going to need in order to conduct the research and the skills for the digital age. So then we take that up through our secondary education and really think about what we can do in terms of our investments in CUNY, our city university system, and our workforce development programs. So one great example of what we've done is making sure that we're not just focused on a job for a job's sake, just checking a box, getting somebody in a minimum wage job, bagging groceries, and calling it a victory. What we want to do is really look at the quality of jobs and make sure that people land in a place that they can build a career. So we launched our Tech Talent Pipeline, which has gotten a lot of buzz around the country, and I was at the White House recently talking about it, where again, firms like Google, Foursquare, ZocDoc, other really important industry players can tell us in real time how we should be spending our workforce development dollars on particular curricula, particular skills that those companies need for their workforce, so that they are recruiting kids from New York, that they're not running around going on recruitment tours, but that they can be guaranteed a constant flow of the type of workers that they need. So for us, it's what I would call a really good example of a demand-driven model, and that's how it should be. The demand is there, we have an obligation to be on the supply side. And again, we do this with our universities, with various boot camps, with all types of alternative forms of education. The message here is that we're not wedded to the old way of doing business. We're wedded to creative solutions to how to give kids and young adults ways in which they have the skills to go work in the new economy. And again, we're 3 years into this and it's actually working. So I can say we have now placed many, many kids, often from very disadvantaged backgrounds, have gone through the Tech Talent Pipeline and now have an average starting salary of $65,000. That's no joke, for a 21-year-old kid who grew up, without any of the advantages that many of us have had. And we are recently just expanded the program. We have 1,000 new kids, and we had like 10,000 applicants when we went live just a couple of weeks ago. So again, it's not just talk, it's actually happening. So I think the message is that we have a formula that works where we can have targeted interventions to push the marketplace in a progressive, yes, I'll use the word progressive, direction, because we want to make sure that the tech ecosystem, that the next chapter of New York City's economy does look a little different. I spent 11 years on Wall Street, and I don't want 20 years from now to be in the same meetings I was in Wall Street where it was like, oh, where, how are we going to have more women and people of color running these companies? If we do it from the get-go, if we start in the beginning and consciously make sure that we're diversifying our workforce and giving kids the skills they need through education, we won't have to back solve the problem, right? That's what our job is, and our job with you to help us figure that out. So we need you at the table to accomplish this, whether it's Schoology, helping teachers share their lesson plans, whether it's being involved in organizations like Girls Who Code, or teaching any of the programs to help young women and particularly people of color computer science literacy for 21st century jobs. We will help you bring those resources to the classroom. We will help you help us. So please, please, please see us as your partner. Our door is open, and have an amazing afternoon. Thank you.